There are problems in people's truth discovery process, of course, along the way, which helps you find more truth, but it's not as bad as what the media makes it sound when they say, oh, look at these conspiracy theorists and look at their mindset, because that's a huge generalization. But perhaps it is those generalizations that we have to be very careful of, and we're prone to do that ourselves when we do question the world's narratives. We do question everything. When we do want to find the truth, we have to have a sense of humility, a sense of temperance, and a sense of moderation. This is important for our process of truth, and I'll explain exactly why in this video. It is recognizing you and nature. There's me, and then there's this world around me. The world is not me, and I am not the world. I may have this experience of my own, but there's other people with experiences of their own, and you may be able to see things that other people do not see, but that does not make you special. Just because you see things that they do not see, they would see it if they were in your shoes, if they had the same experiences as you, or if you had the same experiences as them. Recognizing that difference right there, may you say, is humility. Recognizing the difference between you and the natural world itself, recognizing the fact that you're under that world or you're within that infinite world, is a sense of humility. A sense of saying, I'm not going to put myself on a pedestal, I'm not going to put other people on a pedestal. I'm going to recognize that we're all equal and maybe we're all great, but none one of us is greater or lesser than anyone else. It's a sense of humility, not to put ourselves lower, but to put ourselves equal in the equilibrium. See, humility is simply the virtue that says, I'm not higher. Not that you have to be really lower, and not that we're claiming that anybody has to be higher. It's simply recognizing that you understand you are not God, you are not the king, you are not the person who says how everything should work. And people so often, when they want freedom, they say, I want this solution imposed on everyone. I think this is the way we handle the world, and this is the way we have order, they say. As if, again, that is the temperance, that is the moderation. They need some sort of rule dictating everybody's behavior. But is there humility in that equation of saying, well, this rule only applies here, and you have the voluntary choice to not participate, as you do with this online space, as you do with clicking this video, as you do with any business. But in government, you cannot voluntarily choose to leave that interaction. So what humility is there if you say, well, I'm not special, but if you don't obey me, you're going to have to obey me? It's not really humility. That's dictatorship. That's not really moderation or temperance. That is dictatorship. And so we're going to bring in temperance and moderation as we move on here, but I have to recognize my humility to myself even, because let's say, I just finished this huge event called the End of Slavery Summit with 50 plus speakers and hundreds of resources, and having to make sure I man everything and go live every single day and make sure everything's working constantly. I have to take a break from that because I need to have humility to my own body, in the sense of I don't want to overwork myself. I have to relax. I have to take it easy. My body and my mind might want to go 100 miles per hour and keep recording videos like this, but there's a part of me that also says I need to relax. I need to take a break, despite how much needs the world has, because the world needs to be free, and it has to be free from slavery. Okay, there has to be a time where I say I need to still have humility to my own body, and to say, well, I don't have all the answers, even when I do think I have it all figured out. Okay, so that is, toward my body and toward the world, my relationship with all these things. That, you can say, is consciousness. Okay, but people who are new to info need to have humility. New to any amount of info, and you don't know what other people know. This is why we ask questions. Questions are an act of humility. It's an act of honesty too, because you don't know what they know, and you may think you know what they know, but you still don't know if you know what they know. So honesty through questioning is your best way of getting there. That's why I wrote a whole book about radical honesty, because it's the path of not only sharing truth, but finding the truth in others, bringing it out of them, and ultimately sharing the truth, manifesting the truth in every regard, because that's what it means to be honest. Okay, so scales of justice. If we look at the scales of justice, and I know I'm jumping topic to topic here, but they all tie in. Scales of justice, you got two different leveling playing fields, right? Usually people say, oh, well, it's about a balance, or it's about is one heavier than the other that's going to bring the scale up and down? This does represent an order, or a yin and yang, may you say. The Tao symbol, Taoism, always talking about polarity, the principle of polarity, and Hermetic principles. If you don't know what the Hermetic principles are, I recommend looking into that. But it tells us that there is a balance, and there's an order, and there's a harmonization of the natural. Okay, because you wouldn't balance something that doesn't belong. Say poison in the wild, you wouldn't balance yourself touching the poison. You'd balance things that you can balance, like your chakras in the sense of the medicine, or your brain in the sense of science, or different things within your life. Balancing food consumption with your sleep and your life energy consumption, as I am with this video, and projecting my thoughts and breath. That right there is a balance as well. Breath work, yoga, stretching, all that is an act of balancing the natural, but you wouldn't balance something that's not supposed to be balanced. People saying, well, we need just the right amount of government, just the right amount of moderation. There's never a perfect amount, which is why people are always switching their own rules for their business and for different voluntary spaces. But again, if it's voluntary, it's not really going to be a problem for people, because they can just leave. And if it is a problem, they're going to speak up, and then if it's a really just problem, then it's going to get solved. But the thing is that's a matter of pressing, that's a matter of speaking, it's a matter of educating. It's not the matter of saying, my ideas are so good, I need to use violence to make people comply. And that's not leadership. And that's not moderation. When you are in a voluntary space, people are going to want to use their powers in that voluntary space to control what is going on. And hey, they have every right to, if they created that space, or if somebody gave them that permission, right? You can say, oh, that's the imagined authority of that space, that online space, that business. It's simple property rights. If you own that business, you have the right to decide what happens with that business, right? But if you say, well, I get to control how your business operates, that's not humility. It's recognizing you have your own business, they have their own business. If you don't like it, you do your own, or you speak up about it and you share your ideas, but you can't really use violence. You're not going to jump to violence if you're at least anywhat reasonable. Because why would violence ever be justified, even if you think your ideas are great? Because they think their ideas are great. Everybody's going to have different ideas of how the world works. That is the balance in this universe. This is going back to all the other things I talked about. It's filling in the gaps. When I see something is not being done, I'm going to speak up about it. And independent media and in this truth, freedom community, may you say, this movement, whatever, there are gaps that need to be filled of who's going to be the educator here, who's going to try this new idea, who's going to create a clips channel, who's going to try a live radio, who's going to try a newspaper, who's going to try a summit. These are all the ideas that I come up with because I see other people haven't done it, or they haven't done it in this and that form. So I create it myself. I don't wait for others. I don't yell at them and say they have to do it. I may bring it up to them, but I can't say, you have to do it. But that is exactly how every order in government gets solved. So is it really using temperance to control themselves? Is it really using humility in relation to themselves and others and nature? No, it doesn't use any of that. Their moderation is mere dictatorship. It's not moderation, which is why you can never expect order out of government. Order out of chaos, because what it is chaos. If you're saying violence is justified, to prevent violence, it's like, okay, well, if that's self-defense, sure. But if you're using violence against victimless crimes, which most of the governments of the world are currently doing, then is your violence really justified? If you're saying, here's a list of laws and we barely know them ourselves, but you have to follow them, and if you don't, well, even if you're ignorant of them, you still have to follow them, and you'll find out because we'll throw you in a cage, or we'll decide what we do with you arbitrarily to our whim. I mean, it's all just in the mind. It's all arbitrary. It's not something that they say, this is based on principle, like humility or temperance or moderation. They will speak about that, but they'll attach it to their own arbitrariness. They'll say, oh, this constitution is common sense. Like, what is common sense? What are you basing that on? And they'll say, oh, yeah, it is based on natural law. Define for me, please, what is natural law? They'll say, you have rights. Define for me, please, what is rights? Because unless it's something I own, something I possess, my property, something I can tangibly deal with, if it's a contract that I personally signed, I'm not obliged to follow your rules that you just decide arbitrarily on your own whim for me to follow. That is humility, is understanding you don't decide for everybody else how the world works. And I understand myself in relation to yourself as to say, well, yeah, I shouldn't give you that power, and I shouldn't have that power myself either. Okay? It goes both ways. It's reciprocal. That's how justice works. And this is how the scales of justice work. This is how the yin and yang works. This is how balance works, right? And you can look at vices, right? This brings in the idea of temperance a lot. I talked about it in my naturosophy seminar. But if you have vices, that's problems you have with yourself, not problems you have with other people, problems you have with yourself. These are victimless acts, okay? Vices, whether you're drinking, you're gambling, you're smoking, you're eating unhealthy foods, you know you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing, but you do it anyways, and maybe you know even the consequences. Okay, so you know. So you're conscious. So you see it's a potential wrong thing. You're doing it yourself. No one's going to stop you because they shouldn't. It's yourself. It's you choosing what to do with your own body. Okay, again, our crime systems are saying vices are crimes when that is nonsense, because all people have vices of some kind. And then it's like, what's a vice? It's anything that has to do with your own property of your own self. Like, oh my gosh, I'm drinking too much water. Oh my gosh, I'm sleeping too much. Oh my gosh, right? I'm standing too tall. I'm not balanced enough on my feet. It's like, people can come up with a list of different things that others would consider as vices, but that's why it's such a gray area when it comes to crimes. It's like murder and assault and rape and trespass. It's like, that is clear as day, someone's property being breached by another person, guaranteed. It's not a possible outcome that someone's getting hurt, it's a guaranteed outcome that someone's getting hurt. That's what makes it a crime. That's what makes it a crime, is that you're doing something to someone else, not just to yourself. But if you are doing something to yourself, you have to have temperance, not just in your actions toward others, but toward yourself as well. You can't take yourself out of that equation. Because let's say I don't have control over myself. I don't have moderation over myself. How can I expect to control others or help others in their own self-control? It's like, how can I love others without loving myself first? How can I give respect to others without first giving respect to me? And this is why people, even in voluntary spaces, are not going to like their business leaders, their bosses, because they can't even control themselves and they're on a power trip, right? They understand they can leave that workplace, but my gosh, why can't the boss get better? There is a level of personal temperance and personal work that has to be done, even if somebody's not committing a crime. They could be doing a crime to their own nature, and that, again, we call vices. And balancing that, being conscious of the effects, being conscious of what happens, and trying to be more in control of yourself rather than other people, is that act of temperance. And it is that act of humility, because again, you're not to control other people. If you are, then you're really just asking them questions or helping them and guiding them. You wouldn't be dictating or governing. If you say governing is guiding, then it really isn't government, it's governance. Anyways, that's just semantics, but context, respect, listening, as you're doing right now, these are acts of humility as well, because you're trying to find out, what is the point that I'm driving home? What is it that I'm trying to say? And this is what the media doesn't do on purpose. They say, let's take things out of context so we can run with a certain story. They don't have humility. They don't have temperance. They're not looking for order. They want to cause chaos, because chaos equals clicks, more people, right? Paying attention to these different things that could be very well untruthful. Respect. Right? Respect is another thing. Do you respect someone? Because then you will listen to them. Sorry, a bunch of noise, but if you have respect toward yourself, of course you're going to have respect toward others, but having respect means you're also listening to the conversation. It means that you're willing to learn, and you're willing to learn even if you think somebody's already wrong from the get-go. Because you can learn from their mentality, why they think what they think, and their unique experiences that led to their own conclusions, even if it's similar experiences to others, even if it seems like they're following the crowd and following what the media tells them, they're still a unique person. If you group them with these other people, they don't like that, because they want freedom. Even though they may not be thinking freely, they too want freedom. They too think they're right, just like you. Which is why they have to listen to you and you have to listen to them, if you both have a shared sense of humility, both have a shared sense of honesty, both have a shared sense of temperance and moderation over yourselves and each other's actions, right? So this is the key. And this is the key for all conversations, which makes someone conscious, which makes someone nice, which makes someone have a whole list of other virtues that, Aristotle and many of the philosophers have said, because they're all connected. If you talk about right and wrong, you cannot ignore all these other virtues that are basically built in. If you talk about crimes, you cannot ignore the vices, because the vices can turn into crimes if you're not careful of the vices, if you're not careful of yourself. Okay, the cult leader can the person with great ideas can turn into the cult leader if people are not careful, right? They don't know why those ideas are being shared or how they're being shared and how people are giving their faith onto one person rather than the ideas themselves, because they're looking at the person as the medium toward those ideas, or the book toward the medium to those ideas in the case of the Bible, or the church as the medium to those ideas in the case of religion, right? I need to have this middleman in the middle between me and my natural world and God and the Creator. I need to have that middleman. And we feel like we're stuck on that and we have no choice but to stick with it. Okay, that is where it becomes hard to have temperance over ourselves, because we're constantly in dependence of these other things and we don't have a direct connection with ourselves or with the world around us. Something to keep in mind. Helps with our own vices. Put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're listening to them. Very important, because this is essentially the golden rule, right? But don't just put yourself in someone else's shoes. Put yourself in your old shoes, your own old shoes, because guarantee if you see some truths that you say are truths that are things that people have not seen or have yet to see, then it's probably something you too had to see through time. And you have to ask yourself, how did you come to see that? And would you like it if somebody came up to you and said, this is what you need to know right now? You might say, well, yeah, if it's that important, I want someone to tell me. But think about your mindset back then. Would it really be open? Would it really be open to receiving that information? There was a process of, I went down this rabbit hole, then I went down this rabbit hole, then I went down this rabbit hole, and this one related to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found these other rabbit holes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have cared to see the other rabbit holes. Because I cared about one, I cared about the others. Obviously, we should care about everything, but people are biased in today's world because they say, everybody's got a podcast, everybody's doing this, everybody's got an opinion, and therefore they basically devalue the fact that people have opinions, or the fact that you are trying to share something important that could be potentially very important, that could potentially help them. They completely side it away and basically lack their sense of humility. So people are their own faults often when it comes to the truth. And when people complain about others, it usually just means they're not doing their best themselves. I might be complaining about others right here, but I recognize there's always a better way I can approach things, and that's what I'm saying to you. I'm not actually complaining about people right here. I'm actually saying people are the way they are because of the world that they live in, because of the world they grew up in. I have humility to see that, because I recognize, is it really their fault? Well, it is, but it also isn't. That's humility. That's understanding, they're in the fault. Maybe they're not in the fault. Balance, order, yin and the yang. Because if you fall too much on one extreme, guess what? You're going to make yourself seem extreme. The media will pick up onto it. You're easily the psyop. Because when you fall to one side and you fit yourself into one box, that's how it is easy for people to easily disrupt movements and campaigns and, different ideologies. But if you don't put yourself in one box, it's much harder to do so. That being said, of course, I talk about abolitionism. I say, hey, I'm an abolitionist. I say, you're an abolitionist. But are we really looking at an ideology, or are we looking at an action? We're looking at ending slavery. It worked in the past, it can work for the future. They're going to get blamed on anyways, because what they're doing is what they know to be the truth, right? Which is what happened in the 1800s. They got blamed on for doing things which they didn't do, just so they could be seen as evil. Well, they didn't do anything. They had humility, they were being honest, they weren't attacking back. They were recognizing that if they did attack back, it would make them look worse. And that is something we need to understand as people who, say that they have the truth or say that they want to bring the truth to others, is that sense of, I'm going to take a step back. It's not their fault. It's not my fault, because I know I'm not doing anything. I know I'm not adding fuel to the fire. I know I'm not causing any more problems than there has to be. I'm not intentionally trying to cause debate. I'm not trying to prove that I'm right. I'm just here sharing, and people can do what they want with it at the end of the day. And if people do not listen, it will be their own fault. And who am I to say it's their own fault? we will find out what the truth is through time, right? That's another way of looking at it. It's a sense of humility. You got to remember your own journey. And really, a lot of this basic morality, foundation, and virtue comes down to that family foundation. And I think there's a lot of people who don't have that foundation. So it's tough, of a parent saying, be nice, to the fellow kid, and treat them with respect. See that there is a mutual ownership here of their own bodies. That you should leave somebody alone, basically, that, their toy is their toy, basic ideas of ownership, which people will find out later in time if they don't have a parent guiding them through that process, right? And this is why, natural law is sort of seen as that thing which connects the parent to the child, to nature, to morality in general. Because there's something there that people learn no matter what at the end of the day. And you can say that's natural law, right? It's the sense of morality. It's a sense of conscience. It's a sense of growing into the world and realizing this is what I should do. If you're getting kicked out of every circle, if everybody's always getting mad at you, if you're always ending up in fights, there's a better way you can go about doing things. And guess what? I was prone to it. I did many debates online on Twitch, and I learned my lesson. I said, wait, this is not the best way to approach things. Why am I approaching it like this? Larkin Rose even said, you don't talk to people with this statist mentality, those who believe in slavery, those who believe they should be ruled over by governments. You don't talk to them in front of an audience. You don't do it for publicity. You have to, if you do, in public and in front of an audience, you ask questions, you keep it light, but you don't go deep and ask for people's personal views necessarily and embarrass them and try to put them on the spot. This is something we got to be careful with. If somebody enters the chat room, and I saw this when I went live for the summit several times, someone would be totally new to this knowledge and they would be asking questions, and a bunch of people would start spamming back saying, well, you need to know about this, and oh, what about this, and they think, oh, well, what about natural law? Oh, you don't think harm? What about this? And they start throwing ideas at them. They don't ask questions and realize that they're doing this on a public platform in front of a bunch of other people, on a chat in front of somebody who's totally new to everything, who will easily become overwhelmed, who can't even listen to the video, let alone the chat, and is totally new to the ideas. You have to have a sense of humility to say, okay, let the person, explore the world for themselves, okay? We can welcome them, we can have open arms, but we shouldn't jump at them saying, this is what you must know. This takes time, this takes practice. The more you talk with people who are of mentalities that they don't see the truth, the more you understand this. But if you stay online and you just talk to people online and you talk to streamers and you talk to content creators and you keep consuming more content and you think that's the only world that exists when it comes to sharing truth, you're not going to get the full picture of how to talk to people and how to actually interact with people who are new to everything. Because the people who are online are the people who actively click the videos, who actively want to participate. And there's a lot of people who don't want to, who don't even click on the videos, who aren't even exposed to this stuff in the first place. Those are the people that you're going to have to learn how to talk to, not the people who are already in the community. You don't want to create an echo chamber by talking to people you already know, by doing things you already do, right? I already seen so many times in this community too, people are doing interviews over and over. I'm not against interviews, but experiment, try different things, have some sense of humility to say, this is not working, and we got to try different things, based on the results that we're getting. That's natural law in a nutshell. Consequences, right? We want to try to find what is going to be better to work. And to some extent, you also have to have, again, humility to yourself, not just to the world. And to say, well, I'm not going to do something I shouldn't do. I'm not going to try to be something I'm not, right? I'm making this video because this is my honesty, just speaking to the camera. It's not the best type of content. Not a lot of people will view it. I don't care. I'm going to do it because I feel like it. And frankly, because I know some people who deeply care are the ones who listen to it. And so you keep all this in mind, right? The point is that all the virtues are connected. Words are speaking of ideas, and humans are ultimately never going to be satisfied. Because these words represent these ideas are so grand, no matter what words you attach to them, they're never going to be perfect. There's always going to be room for improvement. So why not be open to that improvement? We even see that truth is ever an evolving process, and we redefine ourselves and our definitions over time again and again. So why should we ever be stuck? We shouldn't be stuck. There's always more we can learn. There's always more we can do. Everything is a relationship, not just between you, me, and the world, but these words, these ideas. So at some point in time, you can make connections. Oh, someone cares about this? Well, let's talk about that. You care about healthcare, so what is it that you would want to see be done in healthcare, for instance? Oh, would you want to use violence for that? Be genuinely curious. Like, I am genuinely curious. I want to learn from this person. Why do they think what they think? Instead of saying, well, if you pass a law, that is violence, and violence is all laws, basically, because all laws are backed by violence, and you will end up in a jail cell if you do not follow those laws, and the people who make those laws, they claim to rule over you. It's like, whoa, you could do that in a video. You cannot do that talking with people, which is why people who consume videos like this have to take a step back and realize the way I'm speaking to you now is not the way you speak to other people. It is through asking questions you speak to other people. And I'm sorry I can't show you. You have to practice it. Okay? And of course, in the future, I plan to do some interview things where I do ask questions, but that's it. Keep it very light. Anyways, everything's a relationship, internal and external regulation. For instance, as well, vices and crimes. Internal is the self, and the external is the property, right? Your own business, your own online space. You own that. Okay? You can choose what happens there. You can choose what rules are there. It's voluntary. People can choose if they don't want to leave or not. And people have to have some sense of humility to respect your rules. And if they don't like those rules, they have their own online space. They can go wherever they want. If they don't like your business, they can go to a different business. They can speak about your business, but hopefully they don't use violence. Either way, they would see that you have this idea of your own business. And, they can influence that to some extent. But it's ultimately yours. They can't undo that process. They can't undo the fact I breathe for me. You can't undo the fact you breathe for you. These are truths inherent in nature. This is why property is important for self-ownership, just as it is much important for ending slavery. You cannot end slavery unless you understand ownership. So, understand then if I moderate my Element chat. Understand then if I moderate my Discord, my Twitch, my YouTube channel. Even though I pretty much keep all the comments, and some comments are not even showing to me for some reason, I don't know why, it's still nonetheless my own space. If I see spam or something that's not supposed to be there, I'll get rid of it, right? But if it's somebody critiquing me, I'm probably going to keep it, because I think that is a sense of humility to let them speak. But everybody's going to have their own views as to what to do with that. The point is, no one's using violence. No one's enslaving another. So, that's the difference, And you can complain about it. You can say, oh, well, that's counterintuitive. You care about freedom, then why are you banning people who are free? It's like, bro, it's my own online space. That is what freedom is having your own space and voluntarily choosing what to do with it. If you do not recognize self-ownership and sovereignty, you do not attain freedom. Remember that control is the requirement for freedom. Sounds weird, but it's simply because you're putting control where it must be, where it is to be. That is, with yourself and what you own, which is yourself and your property. You can control things externally, however, without violence, without slavery, voluntarily. You can give suggestions, you can give influences, and that's all you can do. Teaching, guiding, defending, everyone does this. Yet, in politics, everybody says that, hey, we need violence. And they don't say, hey, we need violence. They say, we need a law. We need a politician. But indirectly, they're saying we need violence because every law is backed by violence. That's true, what I said before. Every politician, if they're going into that office, is legitimizing that process, that very process of we need laws to create things with violence. Even if they say, I'm not going to create any laws, they're still legitimizing the fact that the power position that is able to make laws can exist. And therefore, that legitimizes the fact that laws can exist, that governments can exist, that inequality can exist, that slavery can exist, because you claim ownership over something that does not belong to you, someone's life or their property. If you say, I'm a politician and I get to decide what you do with your life, or your property. That is slavery, because that's something they own, right? We say you have the right to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. What about property? Do I not have the right to something I bought with my own labor, with my own energy? I mean, what's the definition of slavery? 100% of your labor, fruits of your labor being taken from you, what percentage is not slavery? That's the question for you, right? So it's important we understand simple aspects, but notice I asked you a couple questions here, and I'm asking a lot more questions as I make more videos, because that is the best way to teach people this knowledge. If somebody's really open to learning from me, I don't need to ask them questions. They're really just genuinely going to sit down and listen. But not a lot of people will do that, especially when they're afraid of the idea of freedom and they think it's chaos, because that's what they equate anarchy with. And anarchy just means no rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. That's what it means to have temperance. That's what it means to have moderation, is to have rules and therefore be free because you rule yourself. You can't rule yourself unless you have a rule that you rule yourself. So it's so important not to forget those rules. But you can always forget those rulers because the rulers have to play by rules too. Otherwise, what are they? Are they God? They have rules because they live in this natural universe. They have laws they have to abide to. This is why natural law exists. Anyways, public social medias and censorship, I pretty much explained it now. Now you know how it works. If people don't like Twitter, if people don't like Facebook, they go to an alternative. If they feel like, man, these alternatives are not growing, what can they do? Educate, share, that's all they can do. You say violence is the only solution. No, it's not. It's always counterintuitive, it's going to make it look worse, and that always is the result of violence, okay? Holistic approaches and analysis take time and patience, and not a lot of people are willing to do that, to say, oh yeah, violence is not the best solution. Oh yeah, one solution for all the world's crimes is not the best way to handle things. One government, one centralized police, one centralized monopoly on violence is not a good idea to handle all the world's problems, because in a free world you'd have thousands and millions of problems, and that with it, millions and thousands of solutions, not just one. Because now we live with millions of problems, and now a lot of chaos is happening, but yet there would be chaos with freedom. It's like, how do you know that? How do you guarantee that? It's like people only take that for granted, and then they assume that they should do nothing about it, and they should still put their power in someone else's hands. Where's the sense of humility to their own body, to what they can do, to nature and nature's authority, to God, which a lot of people profess to believe in? Where's their humility? Where's their temperance in themselves to say, I need to do something, rather than just do nothing or put it all in my faith and all my responsibility in one thing? This is why the world is imbalanced, and then we lie. We justify lies, and then we don't know where we're going. I mean, it's like you wonder why we can't have moderation, because we don't know what we're moderating. Nonetheless, how we're moderating, because we're not moderating at all. We're giving it away. We're throwing it away. We're saying it's already been handled. Oh, it's handled by politics. Oh, it's handled by this process. No part of the process says, am I responsible? Am I supposed to do something? So it's all about involvement, all about opening, right? Seeing the whole. If you want to see the root cause to something, you first have to expand out in order to see the root cause. Then you can zoom in. But you still have to zoom back out, because the whole is what comprises of all the parts. And if you get stuck on the part, then you don't see the whole. But if you don't get to that root cause, then it can affect the whole. So it's the process of going into the rabbit hole and realizing you need to take a step back. You need to have humility. Humility does not mean limitation. You're zooming in and out. That's not a limitation. You would be limited if you stayed on that one focus, if you stayed on that huger picture. I talked about this with Stephanie Bo Davis in the interview that she did with me. Feel free to check it out, where we go deep into health, freedom, and this sense of humility. But it's an act of non-resistance, a higher moral ground by being in the lower claim. You're saying, I'm not special, I'm not God, you're not special, you're not God, we're amongst each other. You may simply be you to have humility. That's it. And you can see still great potential. You can still say, wow, there's so much we can do and we're great, we have all this power. But you're saying one person doesn't have all the power. You're saying, I don't have all the power. you simply recognize that. Because you're just a human being with different experiences. I'm just a human being with different experiences, right? That's humility. Obedience to your parents is a virtue. However, if they too are obedient to truth, they not just have to be, have humility toward themselves, but toward the truth, just as you would have humility toward them, and they have humility toward the truth. It's a chain effect, okay? Same way a practitioner would say, hey, I want to heal you, I want to help you. They have to have humility to their own practice, and you have to have humility toward them, and they have to have humility toward nature, the thing that they're using to heal you, right? Or the drug, or whatever it is. And so that's all the matter of order. This whole video is summarizing the idea of order. One way or another, obedience is required. Obedience is required, but not to any fellow man. Obedience to truth, obedience to natural authority, to God, to natural law, to the rules of the universe, to simple self-ownership, property rules. These are the obedience that is required. Okay? Now, when I say required, it means that there has to be rules for those things. And there always will be. You can't take them out of existence. People, if they're given trading cards, they're going to trade with one another. They're going to say, man, I like this. I want to keep this for myself. Or I worked for this. I feel like I should have this. Right? But, there's going to be people who claim things that they didn't really work for, and people are going to be like, that doesn't really make any sense. And then there's going to be people who say, I claim to own that when they don't own that. And you're going to say, that's not really going to make any sense. And so then you say, obedience isn't required there. Obedience is required in that of which makes sense, that of which is truthful. Like, if I'm not obedient to my health, I'm going to become unhealthy. If I'm not obedient to my body is going to not work or function anymore. But you may not call that obedience. And that's fine. You may call it humility. You may call that temperance. You may call that moderation. You may call that order. Whatever the word you choose, you understand my context. That's because you have humility to understand it. You're not saying, no, Corey, this is the best way to describe things. This is the best solution. You're wrong. But if you do have a tip for me, please feel free to share. I'm open to it because I have humility back. People are bad. People may not be trustworthy. You're going to have internet controversy. I see it all the time. It's really bad. I don't like seeing the controversy that happens online. I think there's a lot of humility that needs to be done on part of the audience, not just on the people who end up in the controversies. But my gosh, there is order and work to be done everywhere. So do not discount yourself whenever you criticize someone else. Do not discount one idea just because you think it's bad. Okay, you can say communism. I know for a fact it's bad. Corey, you cannot be a communist. Hitler, Stalin, these guys have to be bad. We cannot say they're good. They would not have the power to do what they did if it wasn't for the millions that followed them. And you can say evil itself, that has to be evil. But it teaches us of good. Everything in this life happens for a reason. So, I'm not saying that there is no good or bad. I'm saying you have to be according to nature, as the Stoics would say. Stoicism, there isn't a good or bad, but you have to live it according to nature. So therefore, there still is a good, and there still is a bad. Interesting how that works, huh? Well, decide for yourself. Thank you very much for watching. Corey and Ninjalot, nature is the answer.